The rivers Niger and Congo flowed out of Africa and joined the sea currents that carried millions of captive fathers and mothers, sons and daughters across the Atlantic, depositing them on death camp shores all over the Americas. So begins John Mason's study of African religions in the Caribbean. It is the story of how enslaved Africans, torn from their homelands, refused to surrender the deepest things they carried. They preserved and rethought the sacred templates of their ancestors, planting them in foreign soil so that they could grow and thrive. This essay follows those templates as they survived the killing fields of slavery and flowered into living religions in Cuba, Haiti, Jamaica, and Trinidad. It is a chronicle of memory, resistance, and transformation, of a people who became one with rich new soil, yet never forgot the gods, the drums, and the wisdom of the lands from which they came.
Mason's central claim is that enslaved Africans did not simply blend their faith with Christianity and lose themselves in the process. At every turn, they thoughtfully and actively resisted the cultural oppression of the whites. They resisted in the food they prepared, the colors they wore, the houses they built, the way they talked, the music they made, the songs they sang, the dances they danced, and the images of God they clung to and recreated. The misinformed, Mason argues, use the word syncretism to describe this process, when it would be more appropriate to use the term transfigurativism. Africans did not compromise with the white man's images, they transformed them. Catholic saints became masks for the Orisa, the deities of the Yoruba. The fundamental cultural heirlooms carried into captivity were resurrected and applied anew, assuring the remembrance and reglorification of the past, endurance in the present, and augmentation in the future.
First, the crossing itself, the scale of the trade, and the single corridor of West Africa from which nearly all of these captives were taken.
Mason opens with a haunting image. The great rivers of Africa, the Niger and the Congo, flowed out of the continent and joined the sea currents that carried captive Africans across the Atlantic. These were not anonymous cargoes, but fathers and mothers, sons and daughters, deposited on the death-camped shores of the Americas. There they became one with the rich soil, providing, in Mason's words, the fertile cultural base for their seed to grow in and thrive. The West African slaves and their free descendants, taken to work the sugar, tobacco, coffee, rice, and cotton plantations, did not arrive empty-handed. They carried fundamental cultural heirlooms into captivity, and across generations, they kept preserving and rethinking them. The resurrection and application of these ancient and sacred templates assured three things at once: the remembrance and reglorification of the past, endurance in the brutal present, and augmentation, growth and increase in the future they would build for their children.
The numbers are staggering, beginning in the early 16th century and continuing officially until 1845 in Brazil, 1862 in the United States, and 1865 in Cuba. More than 11 million Black Africans were brought into the Americas as slaves. They were Yoruba, Congo, and other West African peoples, taken to labor on the plantations that made the New World rich. Yet Mason's emphasis is not on their suffering alone, but on their endurance. Across more than 3 centuries of bondage, these Africans and their descendants were continuously preserving and rethinking the cultural heirlooms they had carried with them. This was not a frozen tradition, but a living one, constantly resurrected and reapplied. The sheer length of the trade meant that wave after wave of newly arrived Africans refreshed the cultural memory of those already enslaved, keeping the languages, the gods, and the rituals alive and renewing them in each generation, even as slavery tried with all its violence to erase them.
Freedom came to the Americas unevenly, nation by nation, across nearly a century. The great exception, Mason notes, was Haiti. The Africans there created a revolution in 1791 and established the first African republic in the Americas in 1804, seizing their own liberty by force of arms. Everywhere else, emancipation arrived on the master's timetable. The Africans of Jamaica and Trinidad were freed in 1838, those of the United States in 1863. Puerto Rico followed in 1873, Cuba in 1886, and Brazil, the very last, only in 1888. This long and ragged calendar matters because the religions Mason studies took shape under different conditions in each place. A faith forged in revolutionary Haiti carried a different fire than one practiced in Cuba, where slavery endured into the 1880s. Yet across all these societies, free or enslaved, the same underlying African templates kept reasserting themselves, surviving every law and every lash that sought to extinguish them.
Where did these millions come from? Mason gives a precise and arresting answer. Of all the Africans taken to the Americas as slaves, it is estimated that 99% came from a single corridor on the west coast of Africa, roughly 700 miles wide and 4,300 miles long. It stretched from modern-day Senegal and Mali in the north all the way south to Zaire and Angola. To grasp the scale, Mason offers a comparison. The distance from Boston to San Francisco is about 3,000 miles, and from New Orleans to Louisville, about 700. The trade, in other words, drew from a region as vast as a continent-spanning swath of North America. This corridor was not a random patch of coastline. It encompassed a multitude of diverse ethnic and national groups, all belonging to a single great language family, and that shared inheritance, as we will see, would prove decisive in the New World.
The unity of that corridor was more than geographic. The peoples within it nearly all belonged to the Niger-Congo language subfamily, whose ancient homeland lies in West Africa. This shared linguistic base, together with a common woodland tradition, had for thousands of years promoted the movement and exchange of peoples, goods, and ideas across the region. Out of that long exchange grew fundamentally similar concepts about God, the universe, the social order, and humanity's place within it. Mason argues that this millennia-old familiarity played a crucial role under slavery. When Africans of different nations were thrown together in the forced proximity of the plantation, they were not total strangers to one another. Their shared deep structures of belief eased the pains of captivity and accelerated the cultural fusions that survival demanded. The very diversity of the captives became a strength, because beneath the many tongues and customs lay a common foundation on which a new and resilient religious world could be built.
Now to the demographics of the diaspora. Which African peoples concentrated in which colonies, and how a single nation came to wear many different names.
Mason maps the African presence colony by colony, and the figures reveal how distinct each society's blend really was. In Jamaica, the Congo and the Yoruba each accounted for about 17% of the African population, while the Akan made up 25%, and the Kalabari fully 30%, the single largest group. The picture shifts dramatically in the Hispanic Caribbean. In Haiti, then called Santo Domingo, and in Cuba, some 40% of the African population was composed of Congo ethnic groups. Yoruba and related peoples, shipped largely from the Bight of Benin, made up about 15% of Haiti's Africans, but a much heavier 40% of Cuba's. These proportions are not mere statistics. They explain why Congo traditions run so deep in Haitian Vodou, why the Yoruba Orisa dominating Cuba, and why Jamaica's religious life drew on a different mixture again. Demography, Mason shows, helped determine which gods would rule in which land.
The reach of these two great peoples extended even into North America. Mason cites the demographic estimate that in the United States, 1 out of every 4 African Americans is of Congo descent, and 1 in every 7 is of Yoruba descent. These are not small figures. They mean that the cultural inheritance Mason traces, the Orisa of the Yoruba and the Menkisi medicines of the Congo, flows in the veins of millions of people who may never have heard those names. The Congo and the Yoruba were not just numerous in the islands, they were a foundational presence across the entire hemisphere. Mason's larger point is that the African contribution to the Americas was not marginal or exotic, but central and structural. The presence and resistance of these peoples, he writes, left a vast and indelible imprint on the economic, social, ethnic, cultural, artistic, and religious structure of the Americas in particular, and the world at large. An imprint we are only beginning to read correctly.
One people, Mason shows, came to be known by a startling array of names. In Brazil, descendants of the Yoruba are called the Nago or the Jeje. In Haiti, too, the Yoruba are known as the Nago. In Trinidad, they are called by the name of one of their ancient deified kings and national heroes, Shango. And in Cuba, several 100,000 Yoruba descendants are known as the Lukumi. Mason also reminds us that the very word Yoruba is, as a broad cultural label, relatively recent, dating only to the mid-19th century. Before that, individuals identified first with their hometowns and regions, becoming Yoruba only in relation to outsiders. The older, more ancient designation was Olofin, still used by the Yoruba and their descendants in Cuba. To follow the Yoruba across the Caribbean, then, is to follow a single thread that surfaces under many disguises, Nago in one land, Lukumi in another, Shango in a third, yet is everywhere the same enduring tradition.
The Cuban name for the Yoruba carries a tender history. Lukumi, Mason explains, comes from Olukumi, an ancient phrase meaning "my friend." It appears on old maps of West Africa, where a kingdom called Olukumi or Lukumi is shown to the northwest of Benin, the very name under which early European travelers knew the Yoruba kingdom. By the mid-17th century, observers reported that Olukumi was the lingua franca of the region, undoubtedly the Yoruba language itself. In Cuba, the term came to describe not only that language, but a whole family of related ethnic groups who distinguished themselves as Lukumi, the Nago, the Egba and Egbado, the Ijesa, the Oyo, and the Ijebu. A greeting, "my friend," became the proud self-name of a transplanted nation. It is a small but telling detail in Mason's argument, evidence that the Africans of Cuba did not lose their identity, but carried even the intimate, affectionate words of home across the ocean and made them the banner of a people.
Alongside the Yoruba and Congo, Mason singles out the peoples of Dahomey, in modern Benin, as crucial contributors to Caribbean religion. He names them with care. There were the Mahi of the city of Savalou on the Agbado River, whose descendants in Cuba are still called Mahino. There were the Arara of Alada, and the Fon, also called the Dahomey, of the city of Igbome. All of these peoples actively contributed to the restoration and expansion of Lukumi and Aja culture in Cuba and Haiti, and influenced the formation of African culture in Jamaica as well. Their importance lies in the deep, centuries-old intermingling between Fon and Yoruba religion that had taken place in West Africa long before the slave trade. When these peoples met again in the New World, they were rejoining a conversation their ancestors had begun at home. The Vodun of Dahomey and the Orisa of Yorubaland would prove to be two branches of a single tree, replanted side by side in Caribbean soil. At the heart of Mason's essay is a theory of resistance through art. We turn now to the Yoruba philosophy of creativity
and the genius of transfiguration.
Mason insists that African resistance was not confined to revolts and uprisings, though there were many. It was woven into the texture of daily life. At all times, he writes, Africans thoughtfully and actively resisted the cultural oppression of the whites. They resisted in the ways they prepared their food, in the colors they chose to wear, in the style of houses they built, in the way they talked, in the music they made, the songs they sang, and the dances they danced. Above all, they resisted in the images of God they clung to and recreated. Every one of these acts was a quiet refusal to be erased, a daily insistence that the African self would endure. This is why Mason rejects the language of passive blending. The enslaved were not merely absorbing a dominant culture, they were waging what he calls a transcultural war, fighting on the only terrain left to them, the terrain of culture, memory, and the sacred imagination.
Mason makes a careful and pointed correction of vocabulary. Scholars often describe the meeting of African and Catholic religion as syncretism, a simple mixing or fusion of two faiths. The misinformed use that word, Mason writes, when it would be more appropriate to speak of transfigurativism. The difference is everything. Syncretism implies that the African gave up something and met the European halfway. Transfiguration implies mastery. The African took the master's images and changed their very nature, bending them to African purposes while keeping the African core intact. Africans did not compromise with the white man's images, Mason declares. They transformed them. When a Catholic statue stood on a Lukumi altar, it was not evidence of surrender, but of conquest. The saint conscripted into the service of the Orisa. This single reframing governs the whole essay. What looks from the outside like assimilation is revealed on closer inspection to be a sophisticated and deliberate strategy of cultural survival and triumph.
Of all the weapons employed in this transcultural war, Mason argues, art proved the most effective. He makes a sweeping claim. African art can be argued to be the fundamental springboard for all significant innovations in Western art over the past 3 centuries. This is unquestionably true, he says, of African music, with Yoruba and Congo traditions leading the vanguard. Art was offensive, not merely defensive, where laws forbade the African to speak freely, to gather, or to worship openly. The drum and the song and the carved figure carried the forbidden message in plain sight. Through art, the enslaved smuggled their theology past the slaveholder, encoding the names of the gods in rhythm and color. Mason's point is that the African did not just preserve a heritage under siege, the African counterattacked, transforming the entire artistic culture of the Americas and ultimately of the world. The sacred imagination of West Africa became, in his telling, one of the great creative engines of modern civilization.
To understand why art mattered so much, Mason turns to the Yoruba language itself. The Yoruba use the word agban to mean art, but it means far more: intelligence, cunning, wisdom, ingenuity, skillfulness, wit, and invention all at once. Art, in this view, is not decoration, but applied genius. Mason couples this with 2 further words, itan, meaning tale or history, and the verb tan, which carries a remarkable cluster of senses: to spread or go into diaspora, to propagate, to investigate, to shine, and even to trick. Put these together and a definition emerges. For the Yoruba, and by extension for all Africans, art is the propagation and investigation of wisdom. It is meant to shine, to be seen and heard, and even to trick, to cause a double take, a reinvestigation of what we thought we knew. Art, in this philosophy, is a form of knowledge in motion, a way of carrying truth forward and pressing the mind to look again.
Mason draws out the active, restless quality of Yoruba art through 3 more verbs that sound almost alike: Art is supposed to ru, to carry you, ru, to stir things up and incite you, and ru, to move you to anger or sorrow. By its very definition, he writes, Yoruba art is meant to travel, spreading the news about all things sacred and mundane, and all art begins with God, the ideal. This is why the music of the Lukumi and the Congo of Cuba continues a classical tradition of dispersing and expounding upon fixed, recurring, God-generated themes that embody the cultural ideals and values central to the people's lives. Art is never inert. It carries, it stirs, it moves, and it travels, crossing oceans and generations. Mason even notes, with a touch of irony, that a visit to any major music retailer will demonstrate the continuing vitality of these traditions, evidence that the sacred art of West Africa is still on the move today.
Mason's boldest cultural claim concerns music, and it reaches all the way into the present. The Negro spirituals, the blues, gospel, rhythm and blues, bebop, hard bop, Afro-Latin music, and hip-hop, he writes, are all rooted in West African sacred and secular traditions, with Yoruba and Congo music leading the way. In other words, the entire arc of Black American music, and through it much of modern popular music worldwide, descends from the sacred art carried across the Atlantic in the holds of slave ships. The spiritual that comforted the plantation, the blues born in the Delta, the bebop revolution in Harlem, the global juggernaut of hip-hop, all trace back to the same ancient wellspring. This is the ultimate proof of Mason's thesis about art as a weapon and a vehicle. The very tradition that slavery tried to silence became one of the most powerful and far-reaching cultural forces on Earth, a victory sung in every generation since.
Crucial to Mason's whole argument is a Yoruba understanding of tradition that builds change into its very core. The Yoruba word for tradition is asa, and innovation is implied within it. The noun asa derives from the verb sa, which means to select, to choose, to discriminate, or to discern. Something cannot qualify as asa, as tradition, unless it has been the result of deliberate choice, based on awareness of historical practices and processes. And because choice presides over the birth of every tradition, tradition itself is permanently liable to metamorphosis. This is a profound idea. For the Yoruba, tradition is not a deadweight handed down unchanged. It is a living act of discernment, renewed and rechosen in every generation. This is precisely why African religion could survive the trauma of the Middle Passage and flower into new forms in the Caribbean. The capacity to transform was not a betrayal of tradition. It was the deepest meaning of tradition itself.
Here, Mason reveals the mechanics of transfiguration. The Yoruba speak of iparada, masking, the act of transforming and concealing power. In the Americas, Catholic statues and chromolithographs, the cheap printed images of saints, could wear. More strikingly still, the statues themselves were demoted in African eyes, becoming mere ere, dolls or playthings, childish spirit deputies standing in for the true powers. But the Africans had to do more than transform the white man's icons. They also had to rethink and redesign their own millennia-old sacred images. The shrine of the Orisa, the Oju Orisa, or face of the deities, was reconceived as a portable mask that could dance from room to room and house to house, as the dictates of New World secrecy and survival demanded. Worship had to become mobile, hidden, and clever, and the Africans made it so. Transfiguration extended even to the humblest objects of plantation life. Denied their carved instruments and forbidden their open ceremonies, the enslaved improvised the sacred from whatever lay at hand. Fish crates and hoe blades, Mason writes, were converted into the drums and bells of celebration and resistance. An ordinary tool of forced labor, the hoe blade, became a bell to summon the gods. A discarded shipping crate became a drum to carry their voices to heaven. This genius for adaptation, Mason argues, springs from a deep characteristic of the African mentality, a respect for spiritual power wherever it originates. Yoruba ritual practice proved so malleable that it could tolerate both Christianity and Islam, surviving in the most oppressive slave societies, operating clandestinely at first, and only later more openly. The capacity to find the holy in a fish crate to make a bell from a blade was not poverty making do, it was a sacred imagination that could not be confiscated, no matter how thoroughly the enslaved were stripped of everything else. Beneath the many local forms lies a shared theology. Mason sets out the 10 unifying beliefs that bind these African systems of worship together. Before listing the shared beliefs, Mason explains why these religions could mingle so freely with others without dissolving. The adaptability of the African mentality, he argues, springs from a respect for spiritual power wherever it originates. This accounts for the openness of African religions to syncretism, parallelism, or simultaneous practice alongside other traditions, while still maintaining a distinctive religious consciousness. An African could honor a Catholic saint and an Orisa at once, not out of confusion, but out of a worldview that recognized genuine power in many places. The unifying themes of these systems, Mason says, all focus on the relationship of the individual to a spiritual realm populated by unseen powers, by those yet to be born, and by the ancestors. This is the common ground beneath Cuban Santeria, Haitian Vodou, Jamaican Cumina, and Trinidadian Shango worship. However different their surfaces, they rest on a shared foundation of 10 core convictions, which Mason draws together from the work he has done with the scholar Gary Edwards.
Mason enumerates 10 unifying beliefs, and the first 5 establish the architecture of the cosmos. First, Africans believe there is one God who created and controls the universe and all that it contains. Second, they believe there are selected forces of nature, the Orisa among the Yoruba, which deal with the affairs of humankind on Earth and govern the universe in general. Third, they believe the spirit of a person lives on after death and can reincarnate back into the world of the living. Fourth, they believe that ancestral spirits hold power over those who remain on Earth, and so must be remembered, appeased, honored, and consulted by the living. Fifth, they believe in divination, the conviction that with the correct knowledge, investigation, and sacrifice, the means to solve all problems and cure all ills lie within our grasp. Together, these 5 reveal a universe that is one, alive, and morally interconnected, where the dead, the living, and the unborn share a single continuous community. The remaining 5 beliefs concern how human beings act upon this living cosmos. Sixth, Africans believe in the use of offerings and blood sacrifice to elevate their prayers to the spiritual powers and the ancestors. Seventh, they believe in magic, understood not as superstition, but as the ability to transform things, to turn negativeness into goodness, by using our heads and our abilities to become dazzling, countering and frustrating evil, and illuminating the source of a problem. Eighth, they believe in the magical and medicinal use of herbs, a sacred botany that heals body and spirit alike. Ninth, they believe that ritual song and dance are mandatory in the worship of God and the ancestors, not optional ornaments, but essential acts. And 10th, they believe that humankind can commune directly with God through the vehicle of transpossession, in which the divine descends to mount and speak through the body of the devotee. These 10 pillars, Mason shows, are the shared grammar of every religion he is about to examine.
We arrive at Cuba,
where Mason traces 4 distinct African religious systems, each preserved, transformed, and flourishing on the island.
Cuba, Mason explains, became home to 4 major African religious systems, each rooted in a different region of the continent. The first is Lukumi, the religion of the Yoruba. The second is Arara, a Vodun Mina tradition drawn from the Gay and Akan peoples of Dahomey and the Gold Coast. The third is the religion of the Efik and Ibibio peoples, known in Cuba as Abaquá or Karabali. The fourth is the Congo or Bantu tradition. These were not faint survivals, but fully developed religions, each with its own gods, rites, music, and priesthoods, all flourishing on a single island. Mason notes that in the Americas, certain West African ethnic ideologies attained outright hegemony in places like Cuba, Haiti, and Bahia in Brazil. In Cuba, the Orisa of the Yoruba and the Vodun of the Gay-speaking Arara came to predominate over other African divinities, setting the tone for the island's whole spiritual culture, even as the Congo and Abaquá traditions held their own distinct ground.
Why did the Yoruba and Gbay traditions come to dominate Cuba when so many other African peoples were present? Mason offers several reasons. Part of the answer is timing and concentration. The Yoruba and Gbay arrived later and in greater numbers to the Antilles and to Bahia than many earlier groups. But the scholar Victor Manfredi, whom Mason quotes, points to a subtle mechanism. The dramatic increase in slave imports to Cuba in the early 1800s coincided with the legalization of African associations called naciones or cabildos. These were originally promoted by slave owners in urban areas like Matanzas, with the cynical aim of dividing Africans from one another by ethnic group and of separating them from people of mixed heritage. The strategy backfired spectacularly. Far from weakening African culture, the cabildos became havens for African religious practice and engines for the transculturation of Cuban society as a whole. By the time Cuba abolished slavery in 1886, individual ethnic nations had become firmly identified with particular deities.
Mason lingers on the cabildos because they reveal how African religion survived by turning the master's institutions against him. The cabildos were legally recognized associations formed in colonial Cuba by Black people of roughly the same ethnic background, where the Barakan, the communal slave household, mixed Africans of every origin together. The cabildos gathered people of similar language and culture to worship, relax, and interact among their own. Over the 19th century, their powers expanded. Membership grew to include not only African-born slaves, but criollos born in Cuba, as well as free men and women. They could collect dues, buy land and houses, organize celebrations, march in carnival, aid members in need, and even purchase the freedom of one of their own. Officially, they were Catholic brotherhoods, each placed under the patronage of a saint and registered with the parish church. But underneath this Christian and European facade, Mason writes, the older African mores continued to flourish, hidden in plain sight within the very structures of colonial law.
Religion survived not only in public associations, but in the intimacy of the home. Mason cites the scholar Isabel Castellanos, who reminds us that enslaved people often formed stable families of mixed African ethnicity and heritage with several religious systems, Yoruba and Congo, for example, coexisting under one roof. Crucially, these traditions lived together in a complementary rather than antagonistic environment. A single household might honor the Orisa and the Congo spirits side by side, each respected in its own right. The home domain, Castellanos observes, was in most cases a context of intra-ethnic resistance and retention, and it thus became a very propitious environment for the development of a cultural realignment, particularly in the area of religion. In other words, the family hearth was a laboratory of survival.
Around it, the scattered fragments of different African nations were quietly recombined into new, durable wholes. What the plantation tore apart, the household patiently knit back together, gods and all.
The Lukumi religion is also known as Regla de Ocha, the rules of the Orisa. It rests, Mason explains, on belief in one god, known as Olofin, the lawgiver, or Olorun, the owner of the heavens. Beneath this supreme god stand the Orisa, a word Mason renders as the selected heads. They are God's spiritual agent components, presiding over the forces of the world: sun, wind, rain, thunder, lightning, rivers and oceans, goodness and wisdom, motherhood, disease and death, ethics, and over men, women, children, trees, rocks, and animals alike. The Orisa are involved in the daily lives of humans and in the administration of the universe itself. Mason notes a revealing point of Cuban vocabulary. The Orisa are called in Spanish santos, meaning saints, and pointedly mat dioses, meaning gods. This distinction preserves the Lukumi understanding that God and the Orisa are not the same, that the Orisa, however mighty, remain agents and components of the one supreme creator who stands above them all.
Cuban Lukumi worship centers on some 25 major Orisa, with scores of lesser deities subsumed beneath them. Mason names the great ones. There is Obatala, the Orisa of purity and creation; Shango, lord of thunder and the deified king; Ogun, the god of iron and war; and Alegba, the trickster who guards the crossroads and opens every path. There is Ososi, the hunter; Babaluaye, the Orisa of disease and healing; and Orunmila, the master of the Ifa oracle and of wisdom. And there are the great female powers: Yamoja, mother of the ocean; Oya, mistress of the wind and the storm; and Osun, goddess of the sweet rivers, of love and of beauty. Around these 25, scores of other Orisa gather, each with a domain, a color, a rhythm, and a story. Together, they form a vast and ordered pantheon, a divine bureaucracy of the natural and moral world, every force of life entrusted to a selected head who answers, finally, to the one God above.
Mason stresses that these were not simple folk faiths, but the religions of urbanized civilizations reaching back centuries. The Yoruba and the Arara, he writes, were urbanized peoples from as early as the 11th century, and they developed Ifa, a sacred system of historical, social, and religious texts composed of verses. These verses formed an immense body of knowledge, and they were strictly memorized by full-time priest diviners who maintained this intellectual wealth in trust for the entire national population. There were no written scriptures. The library lived inside the trained minds of the priests. And Mason emphasizes the diviners carried this baggage with them into bondage. When the Yoruba and Arara were enslaved, the Ifa corpus did not stay behind in Africa. It crossed the ocean intact, preserved in human memory, so that the deep wisdom, history, and law of these civilizations could be reconstituted on Caribbean soil. The memorized word proved more portable and more unbreakable than any book the slavers could burn.
The most famous name for this religion, Santeria, has a surprising and revealing origin. The terms Santero, Santera, and Santeria, Mason explains, were not coined by Africans at all. They were born in the Philippines, when those islands were part of the Spanish Empire. There, the words described a Filipino woodcarver who produced wooden copies of the expensive plaster statues of Catholic saints imported from Spain, cheaper images for devout Filipinos who could not afford the originals. A santero was, quite literally, a maker and seller of saints, and also the caretaker of a sanctuary. This tradition of the saint carver traveled across the Pacific and Atlantic to Cuba and Puerto Rico. Only there did the word attach itself to African religion, applied to the Orisa priests and to the whole system of Orisa worship.
The name we use today for one of the great religions of the Black Atlantic thus began as a description of a Filipino craftsman, an accident of empire that Mason traces with quiet precision.
Mason is careful to note that the word Santeria carries a sting and that many practitioners reject it. Originally, he explains, the term was used as a derogatory reference, first aimed at the Filipinos and then at the Africans, mocking the unusual devotion they paid to the saints rather than to Christ or God directly. To call someone a santero was, in this sense, an insult, implying that they worshipped images instead of the true deity. The label was popularized for African religion by Cuban ethnographers, above all the famous Fernando Ortiz, who promoted these outside terms over the names the Africans and their descendants used for themselves. This is why many traditionalists consider the word Santeria pejorative and prefer Lukumi, Regla de Ocha, or simply the religion of the Orisa. Mason's point is a subtle one about the politics of naming. Even the name by which the world knows this faith was imposed from outside, and recovering the African self-designations is part of recovering the dignity of the tradition.
Mason then carries the story into the 20th century United States, where the religion underwent a striking transformation. When Americans speak of the Lukumi or Yoruba today, he observes, they may not be referring to a racial or national type at all, nor to the literal known descendants of Africans from Nigeria or Cuba. In the American context, the term Lukumi Yoruba denotes people, regardless of their ethnicity, who have adopted and now follow the ancient religious views, philosophies, and traditions of the Yoruba and Lukumi of Nigeria and Cuba, and who teach their children to live in this way. The faith had become a chosen path, open to all who embraced it. This cultural movement, Mason records, first took firm hold and began to grow in New York City in 1958. In that moment, an ancient African religion, carried first to Cuba in chains, became a living, growing spiritual tradition in the heart of the modern American metropolis, reborn yet again on new soil.
The second great Cuban religion, Arara, is the direct heir to centuries of intermingling between Fon and Yoruba religion that had unfolded in West Africa long before the slave trade. Mason traces the dates precisely. The influence of the Yoruba city of Oyo brought Ifa diviners to the Fon kingdom of Igbome by the 16th century. Yoruba divinities were formally established there after 1732 by a king who had himself been educated at Oyo, and Yoruba deities had been served, under different embodiments, in Alada even before 1659. When these peoples were enslaved together in Cuba, they were reuniting traditions that had already been merging at home for generations. Arara religion in Cuba thus preserved a deep Fon-Yoruba synthesis, the Vodun of Dahomey and the Orisa of Yoruba land, recognized as kindred powers. This is the heart of Mason's argument about continuity. The religious fusions of the New World were not improvised from nothing, but the continuation of conversations and exchanges that reached back centuries into the African past.
Mason gives a remarkable catalog of how the Yoruba Orisa and the Fon Vodun were recognized as one another, divinity for divinity. The essence of the great Orisa, he writes, was embodied in the Vodun of Dahomey. Orisala, the creator, answered to Lisa. Elegbara, the trickster of the crossroads, was Legba. Ogun, the iron god, was Gu. Ososi, the hunter, was Age. Sopona, lord of smallpox, was Sagbata. Shango of the thunder was Hebioso. Osun of the rivers was Aziri. Osumare, the rainbow serpent, was Da Aido. Oya was Avesan. The divine twins Ibeji were Hohovi, and Orisa Okal, the Orisa of the farm, was Zaka. This was not vague resemblance, but a precise, deliberate mapping, a translation of one sacred language into another. It shows that the priests understood their pantheons as parallel systems describing the same underlying powers. The gods, like the people who carried them, learned to wear many names and to be recognized beneath each of their disguises.
Cuba's third African religion has a more secretive and martial character. Abakua, Mason explains, appeared when Ajaham and Ajaham-influenced captives arrived in western Cuba, chiefly during the first 4 decades of the 19th century, driven by the immense rise in sugar cultivation. Among these slaves were members of an all-important male leopard society called Ngebe in the Ajaham language. In Cuba, these men founded their own society, promulgating the Ngebe values of nobility and government, and remembering their master metaphor of masculine accomplishment, the leopard, who moves with perfect elegance and strength. The Cuban name, Abakua, derives from Abakpa, a term for the Ajaham of Calabar. Quoting the art historian Robert Ferris Thompson, Mason describes a brotherhood that carried into the New World a whole philosophy of just power, secret initiation, and ordered manhood. The leopard, symbol of strength and grace, prowled again in the patios of Cuba, its ancient society reconstituted among men who had crossed an ocean in chains.
The Abakua brought with them one of Africa's own writing systems, and Mason, again drawing on Thompson, describes it with awe. The Ajaham developed a unique form of ideographic writing, signs that represent ideas, called Nsibidi. These signs embody many powers, including the essence of all that is valiant, just, and ordered. Nsibidi, in the Ajaham language, means roughly cruel letters, and Mason suggests we understand them as a kind of justifiable terror in the service of law and government. The intricate diagrams were drawn upon the ground to control a crisis or to honor the funeral of an important person. Crucially, Thompson stresses that Nsibidi owes nothing to the West. There are no Arabic or Latin letters in the script. It is wholly African. In Cuba, Nsibidi signs appeared no later than 1839, evolving into the sacred signatures called anaforuana, calligraphic gestures of erudition and black grandeur, traced in yellow chalk for life and white for death, summoning the spirits of departed ancestors.
Cuba's fourth African religion is the Congo tradition, known as Regla Congo, the rules of the Congo. It is more commonly called Palo Mayombe, Palo Monte, or simply Palo, names that all evoke the sacred trees and sticks of the forest and mountain. It developed from the culture of the Bakongo peoples, and Mason draws a sharp contrast with the Yoruba. Unlike the Yoruba, the Bakongo lack a complex pantheon of named deities. Instead, they possess a complex system of minkisi, sacred medicines, which they believe were given to humankind by Nzambi Mungu, God. The illuminating spirit and healing powers within these medicines are carefully controlled by the Nganga, the ritual expert and healer, and feared in the hands of the Ndoki, the sorcerer. Where the Lukumi served a court of gods, the Palero commands packets of concentrated spiritual force. It is a religion not of worship before a pantheon, but of harnessing and directing the hidden powers that God has seeded throughout the living world.
Mason shows how, even in Cuba, the Congo and Yoruba traditions reached toward one another. The sacred medicines, the minkisi, were called prendas, meaning pawns, and many were aligned with specific orisa. Centella was matched with Oya of the storm, Sarabanda with Ogun of iron, Mamachola with Osun of the rivers, and Patayaga with Babaluaye of disease. A prenda, Mason writes, represents a miniature world in which the spiritual forces of the cemetery, the forest, the river, the sea, lightning, whirlwinds, sun, moon, and stars are kept tied up and ready to do work. The ritual experts who command them, the Banganga, were of many kinds. Some healed with charms, some with roots and herbs, some ministered through divination, and some, the Banganga Simbi, worshipped powerful and mysterious spirits, the Bisimbi, described as the highest class of the dead, immortal beings whose good works let them resist the very processes of decay.
Here, Congo and Yoruba power flowed together into a single Cuban universe.
In Haiti, African religion did not merely survive, it lit the fuse of revolution. We turn to Vodou, the only faith Mason links directly to the birth of a free Black republic.
Haitian Vodou has its birth story tied, Mason writes, to the famous ceremony at Bois Caiman in August 1791 and to the role of the enslaved man called bookman duty. The happening at Bois Caiman is understood to have been both a religious ceremony and a political event at once. It is said that some of the leaders of the coming slave revolt attended. Bookman duty presided as ongan, priest, together with an African-born priestess. A pig was sacrificed, an animal that symbolized the wild, free, untamable spiritual power of the forest and of the ancestors. An oath was taken in blood, and Bookman and the priestess exhorted the listeners to fight bravely against their oppressors. Days later, Mason records, the Haitian Revolution began. No detail in the whole essay more perfectly captures Mason's thesis. Here, religion was not an opiate or an escape, but the very engine of liberation, the sacred ground on which an enslaved people swore to make themselves free, and then did.
Mason pauses to recover the true meaning of a world has badly misunderstood. The Fon word Vodun, or voodoo, designates those great mysteries of life and manifestations of power that surpass our ability to identify them. It names, in other words, the sacred unknowable, the powers too vast for human reckoning. From this meaning, Mason draws an unexpected ethic. It follows, he writes, that the essence of Vodun lies in the need for a person to be calm, patient, respectful, and composed, and not to rush through life. Far from the lurid caricature of popular imagination, Vodun, at its root, counsels serenity in the face of mystery. In Haiti, the chromolithographs of Roman Catholic saints were seen by Africans to depict parallels between the lives of the saints, the Vodun of Dahomey, and the Orisa of Yoruba land. The same transfiguration Mason described in Cuba operated here too, the printed saint becoming a window onto an African power, the Catholic surface concealing a Dahomean and Yoruba depth. The deities of Haitian Vodou are called the Loa, and Mason reveals the African root of the word itself. Loa, he explains, derives from the Yoruba word Olowa, meaning lords or masters. The name is a fossil of the Yoruba presence in Haiti, hidden inside everyday Creole speech. The Loa themselves blend the pantheons of 3 African regions. Mason names them in a great roll call: Lissa and Legba, Ogu and Grand Bois, Sabata and Shango, Erzuli and La Sirene, Agwe, Dambala Aida, Gede, Marasa, Zaka, and Loco. In this single list, one hears the fusion plainly. Legba and Shango from the Yoruba and Fon, Erzuli, the goddess of love, Agwe and La Sirene of the sea, Gede, the lord of death, the Marasa, or sacred twins, Zaka, the spirit of the harvest. The Loa are a new world assembly drawn from Dahomey, Yorubaland, and the Congo alike, a parliament of African powers reconvened on Haitian soil to serve a people forging a nation.
To explain what Vodou really is, Mason turns to the art historian Robert Farris Thompson, who offers one of the essay's most memorable phrases. Actually, Vodou was Africa reblended, Thompson writes. The encounter of the classical religions of Congo, Dahomey, and Yoruba land gave rise to a Creole religion, a wholly new faith assembled from old and noble materials. This new religion, Thompson explains, has 2 great parts. One is called Rada, after the slaving designation for persons abducted from Arara on the coast of Dahomey, a name itself derived from the holy Dahomean city of Alada. The other is called Petro Lemba, or simply Petro, after a messianic figure named Don Pedro from the southern peninsula of Haiti, joined to the name of the Northern Congo Trading and Healing Society called Lemba.
Both Rada and Petro draw on multiple African sources. Neither is traceable to a single origin. Vodou, in Thompson's and Mason's telling, is not a corruption, but a creation, Africa's classical religions reblended into something new and whole.
Mason, following Thompson, draws out the profound polarity at the heart of Vodou. Rada, predominantly Dahomeyan and Yoruba, is the cool side of the religion, associated with the achievement of peace and reconciliation. Petro, predominantly Congo, is the hot side, associated with the spiritual fire of charms for healing and for attacking evil forces, what Mason glosses as a kind of liberation theology. Yet the two are not simply African traditions kept apart. They fused similar religious aspects of different African cultures and then redistributed them. The hot sorceress potential of an otherwise cool Yoruba river goddess was reassigned to the Petro side. Correspondingly, the cool, creative Congo Simbi spirits were lifted out of the realm of attack charms and reassigned to Rada, where their positive powers stood among the gentle gods of Dahomey and Yoruba land. This is transfiguration at the level of theology itself, the Africans not merely preserving their pantheons, but recombining them into a balanced architecture of cool peace and hot fire.
Jamaica's African religion took a distinct shape, bound to family and birth. We turn to Cumina, the ancestral zombies, and the figure of the Obeah Man.
In Jamaica, Mason explains, the religion called Cumina rests on a foundation entirely different from a creed one chooses to join. Membership in Cumina is a matter of birth. One belongs because one's family can be traced back to Africa and is therefore linked forever to the African deities, person to particular ancestral nations and their gods. 3 ranks of spirits come to Cumina and dance: sky spirits, earthbound spirits, and ancestral spirits. The Cumina members who belong to the Baptist denomination baptize in the river and so remain close to the African river deities who come to protect them. Here Mason shows a religion organized not around temples or conversions, but around bloodlines, a sacred inheritance passed down through the body itself, binding each generation to the specific African ancestors from whom it descends.
Mason details the inner structure of Cumina, which preserves the memory of specific African nations within Jamaica. Some deities serve particular ethnic groups or nations, and the 5 usually named are the Mondogo, the Moyenge, the Machande, the Congo, and the Mumbaka. Other groups are mentioned too, among them the Gao, the Igbo, and the Yoruba. Each of these groups has many spirits drawn from its own family or clan, and these spirits come specifically to its descendants. The religion thus keeps alive, generations after the Middle Passage, the distinct identities of the African peoples from whom Jamaicans descend. A family does not simply worship African gods in general. It is tied to the gods of its own nation, summoned by that nation's own special drum rhythm. In Cumina, Mason shows, the map of Africa was not erased by slavery, but folded into the structure of Jamaican spiritual life, each lineage remembering, through its spirits and its drums, exactly which African people it belongs to.
The spirits of Cumina bear a name that has been wildly distorted in popular culture, and Mason restores its true meaning. The spirits that come to each clan are called Ancestral Zombies, a word formed, he explains, from the Kikongo words Nzambi, meaning God, and Nfumbi, meaning spirit. Many of these ancestral spirits grow strong over time and rise to the status and power of a divinity, summoned by their own special drum rhythm. In Cumina, the dead are not gone. The dead, as well as the living, are counted as active members in the religious life of the community. The spirits of dead relatives have the power to aid or to harm the living, and their assistance can be obtained through concentration, by thinking, while alone, about a dead relative. But the dead also make demands. If satisfactory funeral rites are not provided, or if the living do not live right,
The dead express their displeasure by causing illness and other misfortunes. The zombie here is no horror, but a powerful and watchful ancestor.
Jamaica differs from the other societies Mason studies in one striking way. Unlike Cuba, Trinidad, Haiti, and Brazil, there are no spirit shrine houses in Jamaica, no fixed temples for the deities. In their place stands a particular kind of specialist, the Obeah Man. The Obeah Man, Mason explains, are spiritual experts who know the drum rhythms, the dancing habits, the feedings, and the methods of controlling large numbers of deities and ancestral spirits, the zombies. The word Obeah itself, Mason notes, is a creolized version of the Bini or Edo word Obiha, which describes a professionally trained diviner and doctor, one who is initiated and expert in one or more fields of medicine. Far from the sinister caricature of colonial propaganda, the Obeah Man in Mason's account is a learned and initiated healer, the heir of West African medical and divinatory science. He is the one who holds the knowledge of how to summon, feed, and command the spirits, the living library of a religion that built no temples but never lost its gods.
Finally, to Trinidad, where worshippers proudly call themselves the Yoruba nation, and where a deified king gives the whole religion its name.
In Trinidad, Mason finds a community that held on to its African identity with unusual pride and clarity. Trinidadians associated with the Shango worship centers, called chapels, refer to themselves directly as Yoruba people, as the Yoruba nation, or as Orisha people. Many are descended from Yoruba who were brought to Trinidad as slaves, and they consciously distinguish themselves from the Radas and from other groups of Afro-Trinidadians. Here there is no need to recover a lost name from beneath the Catholic surface, as in Cuba. The Trinidadian worshippers wear the name Yoruba openly as a badge of who they are. Mason's brief treatment of Trinidad rounds out his survey of the Caribbean by showing yet another pattern of survival. In some places, the African nation hid. In Trinidad, it stood forth and named itself. The religion of the Orisa, carried across the Atlantic, became here the proud public identity of a people who never stopped calling themselves by the name of their ancestors. The Trinidadian religion takes its popular name from a single great deity. In Trinidad, Mason explains, Shango, the deified Yoruba king and god of thunder, is only one of a score or more Yoruba Orisa who are honored, yet he gives his name to the whole tradition. Each of these powers is approached with specific chants, with drum music, and with food and blood offerings, and the worshippers communicate with their deities through the agency of the Yoruba system of kola nut divination, casting the segments of the kola to read the will of the Orisa. In this small detail, Mason closes the circle of his argument. The same Yoruba oracle that the priest diviners had memorized and carried into bondage, the same sacred technology of consultation, was still being practiced in Trinidad, the kola nut still answering the questions of the faithful. From Bois Caiman to the chapels of Trinidad, the African gods remained reachable, and the ancient means of reaching them survived intact across the ocean and the centuries.
Mason closes with the image that gathers his whole argument together, the chameleon, who changes color to survive without ever ceasing to be itself.
Mason ends with a single luminous image. African religions in the Caribbean, in order to ensure their survival, adopted the wise tactics of the chameleon. They learned to take on and redefine the dress and colors of their opponents, while still maintaining the distinctness, wisdom, and beauty of their own cultural identities. This is the perfect emblem of his thesis. The chameleon does not become the leaf it sits upon. It merely wears the leaf's color the better to endure. So too, the Orisa wore the masks of Catholic saints. The Loa hid behind chromolithographs, and the Obeah Man practiced an ancient African science under a colonial name, each disguise a strategy, never a surrender. The world, Mason concludes, is so much richer because of their victories in this transcultural struggle. What was meant to be erased became one of the great spiritual and artistic inheritances of humanity. The gods survived the Middle Passage, and in surviving, they enriched the whole of human civilization beyond measure.
John Mason's study leaves us with a transformed understanding of what survived the Middle Passage. The Africans brought to the Caribbean did not arrive as blank slates to be written upon, nor did they passively dissolve into the religion of their masters. They carried the Orisa and the Vodun, the Minkisi and the ancestral spirits, the Ifa verses and the sacred drums, and they transfigured everything the New World threw at them. In Cuba, they built Lukumi, Arara, Abacua, and Palo. In Haiti, they reblended Africa into Vodou and lit a revolution. In Jamaica, they kept their nations alive in Cumina and the wisdom of the Obeah Man. In Trinidad, they stood forth as the Yoruba nation still. Through the cunning of the chameleon and the genius of transfiguration, they preserved the past, endured the present, and built a future. The world is richer for their victory. Thank you for listening, and may these living traditions and the people who carried them never be forgotten.